Alright, in the last video I talked about how this subframe had gotten a little bit, not the subframe, I'm sorry, the frame rails had gotten a little bit wonky. When I went ahead and reset everything, I leveled the back. The stock frame rails, I kind of put a level across it, and then I leveled across the subframe. I think what I said in the last video was it was like an 8mm deal over here. I kind of split hairs on leveling this whole thing and got the rear perfect. The cage is perfect. The factory frame rails back here, like the two factory pieces that are left, were a hair off, and now it's got this subframe set where it's only 3.5, 4mm that it's got to be shimmed up on that side, so I fixed it quite a bit. Bottoms are marked. I used the transfer punches, squared this off the frame, centered it, put the transfer punches on the bottom. So now this can come back off, and until I put this on a rotisserie or flip it over to drill the holes in the bottom and get the holes through it, and then build the slugs that are going to get welded in to locate everything. So until I do that, then, well, I guess I could mess with the rear subframe and do all that. The rear section of the subframe, that's the other piece that's on there. Because now that this is sitting good, everything is good. So I can shoot the laser and measure off everything and figure the rear out. The only thing is I was screwing around with this yesterday, and I put the control arms on it and fit the tire on the front to turn it to see what it would do. And when I turned, the tire pulled the subframe over, not a lot, but like an eighth of it. I watched it when I turned the tire, it pulled the subframe over. So that's when I decided to take it all back apart, remeasure everything, get it all figured out, and not do that again. So I will probably put the rear piece on, get it tacked in a few places, because once it's located and once it's centered and leveled and offset from this guy and everything's done with it, I will probably tack a piece on each backside back here, and then tack something from the outside of these two frame rails down to locate it, then unbolt all this shit and drop this and get this out of here. And then what I'm also working on is I took get my leg out from between the cab and the tripod. I put the drive shaft in. I'm just trying to start visually moving backwards on this to get bracing and stuff like that done. I'm getting 2 support bars up front. This guy is in. There'll be one on the other side that matches, and then I'm probably going to come off the other side over here and come up and tie into this frame rail to kind of stiffen this front up. And this guy, this was obviously a notched piece. This was like 14 degrees on that to notch that guy, and then this one had a 50 something degree notch in it, and then this bottom section here was all kind of hand filed. I used the bandsaw for a second just to trim some little pieces off, and then hand filed it to fit, because it's fitting from a round tube to rectangle stock. But of course, we need it to hold. Put the magnet up there, and you can see the fit up. Yeah, it's and there's gonna be there's the reason it looks like there's a gap down there is I haven't welded that all the way through, so there is a gap made up for the weld. So when the weld gets through on that tube, then come on. Yeah, you can see I need to carry that weld all the way around the front and finish it. And that's where the gap is on the bottom, is this will actually fit with the weld underneath it. So that's what's going on now. And the other tube is cut over there. Again, this was the measure this side, cut this side, and then check it on both sides to see if it's close, and then basically just kind of do the exact same thing to both tubes. Or once you get one tube finished, then you know you can do the exact same thing to the other one. And what's been making this really easy is I picked this guy up. It's a Bosch laser measure. So I knew, turn this thing on and see if I can get it. I knew where the bar was going up here, and you pretty much just put it where you're going to be, and then when the laser hits right in the crack, it was giving me, well, obviously it's going to change because where the laser's hitting, it's going around, but it was 1'6½". So that actually gave me, that did a pretty decent job of measuring this out. Whereas if you stuck a tape measure in there and you're trying to get the tape measure to fit or anything like that, it's kind of a pain in the ass. This thing's pretty sweet. I think it was 30 bucks. It's got, this one will do up to 65 feet, and it's accurate to within 1/8 of an inch and 65 feet. So I'm dealing with not even close to that with this chassis, and it should be pretty good. Just like if I wanted to go from this corner, you see it right here. If you see the red dot over there, 5, 4, and 13/16, 7/8. Yeah. So it's a pretty handy tool to have. Pretty nice on the second one to do 2 cuts, and the fucking thing fits perfect. This is obviously the first cut up here was figured out over there, and it's going to work over here great. But on this bottom one, the way I make these is I kind of just, I know the total length between here and here, but you know that length is in the crack down there. So what I do is when I'm cutting with the knot or with the hole saw, I know I want the notch to kind of end right about here in the center of the tube. So that one took 3 cuts, just little by little by little, to fit it in and get it perfect. And I kind of just took this one, put it in there, and got it close, and ran the hole saw through it, and the damn thing fits in dead nuts. All right, here's how I started. I have this little tripod, and it's got like a ball and socket joint. You can lock it in wherever you want, and when you turn that laser on, it keeps it locked. That's why it's flashing. It's telling you it's not level, but I don't need it level. What I needed it to do is shoot a line, which obviously this tube wasn't there at the time, but that's what I did, is shot a line through the center down here up into this tube. And then this isn't set up right, but I put this up, kind of got it almost perpendicular, and then, if you can imagine, rolled this guy down till it was kind of straight, parallel with the level. Then that gave me my first cut on this, which was about 14 degrees. That's when I used this guy, shot from, it measures from the butt of this, so I shot from here right into the crack. That gave me 1'6", and I do that a lot. Actually, the first one I cut was 16 inches, and I went to fit it up, and I'm like, why is this short? Because it's 1'6", not 16. My brain does that all the time. So then what I did was I notched the first piece at 14, and then I cut it at 18½. Then put it up here, and obviously with the notch, it didn't fit down here. So what you got to do is you have to take this piece and kind of eyeball it this way, get it in line with this guy on this plane. Then you would draw a line right here in the crack and come up, and that's your notch plane, or that's the piece you're going to set on your notcher where the notch is going to come through. That's when, what I was talking about a second ago with, I knew I needed the notch to roll right over the center of this tube where it was going to fit. That's when you take it, put it in your notcher, make sure your piece is squared with the, let me see if I can explain this better. basically, when you draw a line on something and you set it in the center here, I think I went over this in another video, and then I have this set for the distance from the top of the notcher to the top of the tube, and then you add half the tube diameter, and what you do is you put this on, and then wherever your edge falls here, that's where the line needs to be, and that puts the notch on the tube on that plane. If that makes sense. I hope I'm not fucking confusing you. But yeah, this is a good trick, and like I said, on this guy it was 3 cuts because I initially did it, fit it. It was a hair tight. It didn't fit up here perfect, so I notched it again, did it again, then notched it one more time, and that's when it dropped in place and everything fit, with the exception of having to, like I said, hand file the bottom piece where it just kind of touched the bottom of that rectangle tube down there. So I hope that helps anyone out. And like I was saying, this mount, if I get these legs off it, it's just a socket until you turn this little knob and it locks it. And it has if you can see, there's a piece there, so you can like lean this thing all the way over and turn it and lock it in place. And if you have a laser, your laser should be able to do that if you just turn it on and don't. This is the lock. This unlocks it. Now the laser is like sitting dead nuts level and all that stuff, or you know, when it's not flashing, when you get it to do that. But then when you lock it back, then you can take it and turn it whichever way you want and use the laser as a guideline to measure, figure out angles or anything like that. All right, rear front subframe, front rear subframe, whatever. It's tacked in. It's set. It's 5 millimeters higher than the front. Everything's good to go. I threw these on to do this, and yeah, it looks pretty good. And I shut the laser down the center and measured. This front track width is 4 inches wider than the rear. So, holy Toledo, 50 millimeter wheel spacers on the back to get this square, to get this thing. They call it square, but it would kind of be like a rectangle, you know what I mean? Whatever. So yeah, there's that, but everything's looking good so far.